So, welcome
Hello.
back, one and all,
Hello.
to another episode of Am I Nuts? And this week, as promised, I think
Mm-hmm.
we are going to be talking about booze. We've already, just off pod, then I think realised how much there is to talk about with this.
Yeah, it's almost its own series. And I know we talked about it quite a lot on the main pod, on the Women's Running podcast. We talked about it loads. God, was it like this time last year? I think we
I
chatted
think
about
so.
it.
We did. I've just remembered that we did have quite a few people be like, shut up about it. So if this episode
Yeah.
isn't for you, don't worry. I mean, it could potentially be an affirming episode for you if you're somebody who doesn't drink. It could be an emotional one for you if you're a person who has had experiences with having a negative relationship with alcohol or struggling with that and then doesn't do that anymore. It could be something that makes you think and gives you a bit of a new perspective if you are someone who does drink quite a lot. Or
Yeah. And I think
no
that there's
shame, first of all. I think from the off we need to say about this
absolutely,
because there's so much
absolutely.
shame around all of this.
Yeah, and everyone welcome, because I think this is one of those subjects, are we nuts to worry about booze? It's one of those subjects where I think, well, I love it that me and you are coming from it from a generationally different perspective. But actually,
Mm.
it's quite similar when we've talked about it off pod and on pod. I think our experiences are quite similar. I think our thoughts on it are quite similar. But I think it's a really great one to chat through, because anyone that's sort of my age, in our kind of 50s and stuff, we will read online about how the younger generations are not going down the booze route in ways in which we did.
Yeah.
And I remember reading that and that having these sort of couple of thoughts about that. One of them being, well, why not? What's so bad
Yeah.
about it? And the other one going, oh, that is amazing. That's great. And
Yeah.
certainly within our company, like when we've gone out and had socials and stuff, I've really noticed the difference that when I would go out in my 20s, when I was a journalist back then, everything was incredibly booze focused,
Yeah.
and the aim of the game on a Friday night was to get as absolutely trolleyed as possible. And when I go out now with our company, which is kind of quite age diverse, the younger members of staff are not the ones who are falling against lampposts. It's the older ones.
That is
And
kind
I
of
find that
true,
very
isn't it?
interesting.
I think
Mm.
I'm from an interesting cusp generation with my relationship with booze. I think, firstly, my background, and I hope my family don't mind me saying this, is quite boozy, just in the sense that, like, my family are quite a typical middle class family in terms of drinking, I think. Like,
Mm.
it's always been a thing that you have a little tipple in the evening and then you have a pre-prandial before dinner and then you have a and it's like, it's very normalized that that's a thing, even like
Mm.
having a glass of wine with lunch or something. If you're going out for lunch, or if you were, then that would be like super normal. And I
Mm.
don't want to throw shade on my family for that, because I think that, like, generationally, that is something that is just like has been part of culture.
Yeah.
I'm a like cusping millennial Gen Zer, so I think I'm the
Mm.
last year of millennial before you get to Gen Z.
Mm.
And so I would say that that there are lots of I have quite a lot of sober friends. I would say that most of my friends, I don't have many friends at all who would drink, like, you know, certainly not like every day or like multiple times during the week or anything. Like, drinking would be a thing that you would go out and do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, or you might have like a glass of wine watching the Traitors or something, but like it's not necessarily like it's not part of the habit, it's a part of the routine.
Yeah.
But I didn't grow up in this culture of like nights out not being about alcohol, or about, like, definitely my experience growing up as a teenager and in my early 20s, and now still, to be honest, with like
Mm.
going out and stuff, it is still a thing that is like a bit more booze focused. I do wonder, there is a part of me that feels, from a very innocent, lovely perspective, that like Gen Zers are waking up to some of the health concerns around alcohol and are instead choosing to be sober.
Mm.
The more cynical part of me thinks that actually it's probably a bit of that, but also alcohol is incredibly expensive. Going out has become much more expensive. So I think
Mm.
probably people are sitting in their bedrooms more. And I also maybe wouldn't be surprised if it was like cheaper to buy ketamine.
Yeah.
I have no idea, and I don't want to be too cynical, but I wonder whether it's like I do think there's a bit of a shift towards like cleaner living, but I also sometimes think that like we may be I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't be skeptical and I should assume that a younger
No, I
generation is instead trying to be healthier. I just wonder whether there are different ways that they would let off steam and do the things that just
yeah.
aren't revolved around having 8 pints.
I think actually that's a really important thing to consider, and I hadn't really considered it. It's true. I think cost of living
Mm,
is a huge factor in it. I think that's massive. I think it's kind of in its way, it's a bit like I was talking to Dave a couple of days ago, and we were talking about when we gave up smoking,
mm,
and and I'd sort of forgotten when because we met quite sort of later on, like, in our 30s, and both of us were ex-smokers at that point. And I said to him, when did you? Oh no, he said to me, "Did you give up at the smoking ban? Was that the thing that made you give up?" And I was like, "No, no, 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 no." Thinking, "No, no, definitely not, definitely not." And then I counted back on the years, and he told me when the smoking ban. When I was like, "Oh yeah, no, it was," because the
yeah.
smoking ban kick-started so many people giving up because of a lack of opportunity and shame, right? For me, it was shame. It was kind
Mm,
of realizing that I stank of cigarettes. None of my friends did anymore. Everyone was gradually just sort of giving up. And it was like, right, okay, it's too embarrassing to be rebelling at the age of 31, 32. It's time to give up smoking, sort of thing. And I feel like with drink, there's the same sort of thing. There's that kind of, so yeah, I do think that there is that sort of an understanding of health, which is much more pervasive than it would have been
definitely.
when I was growing. And particularly when I grew up in a very similar family situation where drinking, particularly at the weekends, drinking and socially around a table, that was pervasive. That's everything. Like, we always did that. It was always wine.
Mhm.
And when you met up with family, there was always booze, and yeah, lunchtime drinking, and whatever. So there was a lot of it. But obviously, when you're in your late teens and early 20s and stuff, you're less likely to be sitting around a table having a dinner party with your friends and saying, "Oh, should we open the Chablis?" You're not
Yeah.
doing that, are you? You want to go out, and so you find ways and means of getting your drug of choice in order to
Yeah.
have that good time. Yeah, so it's interesting. I hadn't actually considered cost of living and
I do
all of
think
that.
it's a bit of a thing, and I think um the general decline in like nightlife and pub going and stuff, I
Mm,
think that is still a bit of a layover from COVID. I think still massively is affecting younger generations of people who I'm absolutely not trying to say are all instead out there doing like class A drugs instead.
yeah.
But I do think maybe don't have that as part of their like uh I don't know, part of their routines, part of what they do with friends, because
Mm,
during their really formative years that wasn't an option. That wasn't what they were doing. Instead they were like playing Fortnite online, or they were
yeah.
like, and so I do think that the way that young people interact has changed. But back to what we know, I guess,
Yes.
because
Let's
this
let's
is
talk
all a
about
little bit,
us. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
let's talk about ourselves. So I think, do you want to begin us? Because I feel like you as a wiser person have a
Love
longer,
that.
thank
As
you,
a
yeah,
much
well
older
chosen,
person. Yes.
have a longer bit of life to look back on and
Yeah.
tell us about how your relationships changed with it.
It's interesting, isn't it? Yeah, when I look back at that kind of relationship with booze, it's always been really muddled, really tricky. Um, yeah, it's a tough up and down one. And I think I feel really, really happy with how booze is in my life now, which is actually a very small amount. And I never, ever, ever thought I'd be the person to say that. I remember even 5 years ago, well, maybe not 5 years ago, but 10 years ago, I remember thinking about the very idea of drinking just one glass of wine in the evening as being, I don't know, a fairy tale. I couldn't understand
Mm.
anyone that just had one glass of wine. I mean, yeah, I was brought up in a very similar family, so drinking was very common, and we would have kind of like half glasses of watered down wine from a very early age. Um, but I then my relationship with booze became quite complicated quite early on, where I remember kind of stealing booze like from my parents. And I remember drinking hugely to excess from kind of, I don't know, 17, 18 onwards. Yeah, so those kinds of years. And that kind of just that went through because I went to university, then I went to and got into publishing and journalism and stuff. And oh my God, the 90s and journalism and drinking was that was an unholy Venn diagram. So that was fairly grim, and that was lots of drinking at lunchtime and drinking in the evenings, drinking all afternoon, having planning meetings for the next magazine, and that being pub based. So there was all of that, and that it got to a peak in my late 20s, early 30s, where I really, really kind of drinking way, way, way too much. And now when I look back at that, I think it was problematic,
Mm.
and nothing really stopped me in my tracks with that problematic association with that. There were times where I would have slightly less and times when I'd have slightly more. But the thing that stopped me in my tracks actually was COVID. So that for me is relatively recent history. But what happened then was like within a week of lockdown, I was so struck with anxiety during that time. I had such an awful reaction to it. I couldn't understand how people were going around their daily lives and coping with stuff. I spiraled completely. And within a week of lockdown in March, I remember thinking to myself, I can't drink
Mm.
because I knew that I would use it
Yeah.
as a kind of crutch. So I completely knocked it on the head. I remember it. I remember that just like March, whenever it was. I remember just going, nope, that's it. No more drinking. And it was no more drinking in the week, I think, was my thing. And so since then, I've had an informal little rule in my head, which is I am allowed a bit of wine on a Friday and a bit of wine on a Saturday. If I go out in the week and I go to the pub with a friend, then I can drink. So if it's
Mhm.
a kind of going out, then I can do that. But I don't really go out very often. So it's kind of once every I don't know, once a month, once every 6 weeks or something, I might kind of go against that little hard and fast rule. And on a Friday, I have a little tiny glass. It probably adds up to about 120 mil, something like that. That's how much wine I have on a Friday, and that's how much wine I have on a Saturday, unless
Mhm.
we've got family over or friends over or something. And I will, if we go out, then I will definitely have way more than that, and I'll really feel it. But that's
So,
where I've
but
got to.
on a Friday and Saturday, you really are drinking. That's probably less than 2 units.
Yes, I
Yeah.
think, yeah, it is. It is. I drink less than I have normal white wine, but I drink less than a glass.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think I still drink more than you, but I think
Yeah. But
that
not much more, do you? I don't think.
no, I think I've definitely gone on a bit of a similar journey, I guess, that um I also from a young age was very like excited by the idea of drinking, and
Mm,
I think that's what I was meaning, while not trying to suggest that like yeah, Gen Z as a like I don't know, I don't want to like I have no idea what people get up to in their own time, but I think
mm,
that is a natural thing, that you have this sort of like you want to blow off some steam and you want to find ways of exploring that like freedom and that rebellion a bit, like you said. And
mm,
definitely culturally at the time, alcohol was the way to do that, and that was what people were doing. And so like house parties were a big thing, and drinking a lot at those parties, and the silly stories of like who was the drunkest and
mm,
was quite a thing. And then when I went to uni, there was lots of going out, and that was a thing. But actually, I think also looking back, that was probably when it became the more home drinking habitual thing.
mm,
That like the line between a night out and a night in became quite blurred, because you're living with a bunch of friends, and so you might, if you decide, oh, let's
Yeah.
not actually go to that thing, you might well still sit there and drink a crate of beers and like play cards and
Mm.
do silly drinking games or whatever at home. And I did quite a lot of that with my flat in first and second year of uni, and we were a bit more gentle in our final year, but I think by that stage it's like it's already kind of taken hold a bit, and then it still is like definitely what you're using to socialize and to relax. And so
Mm.
I think maybe that's where that line became a little bit more blurred. And then definitely throughout my 20s, I wouldn't drink every day, and I wouldn't like, but I definitely didn't have any hard and fast rules about, yeah, drinking in the week. Or and when I did drink, I don't remember counting, you know?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and I think COVID for me, I had a few experiences in my 20s, which I think are normal. I'm not trying to shame myself, but are also like not really, shouldn't be, where like
Mm.
I would be incredibly sick, like all day the next day till 10 p.m. or whatever, if I was hungover, or like
Mm.
I would be, which is essentially probably alcohol poisoning if you're being
Yeah, it
sick to
is.
that point. Um,
Yeah.
and I would like, I lost my passport in a foreign country because I was super drunk. Can't remember how that happened. Like
Oh
a few
god.
things like that happened where like I was maybe in some slightly unsafe situations. Um, and like regularly on my year abroad, like I would come home from a night out in Paris completely on my own and not remember chunks of that journey. Like now looking back again, it's like when you look back with perspective, it's like that's such an unsafe position for someone who's like 21 to be putting themselves in. But
Yeah.
I just didn't see that at the time, and I was just having fun at the time, it felt like. So I think those had kind of compounded to start to, in my like mid 20s, create a bit of a relationship with alcohol where it made me anxious. Like I still
Mm.
would drink too much, but I would definitely the next day be like, oh, this isn't good and I'm never drinking again.
Mm.
And then like a couple of days later would again.
Yeah,
um,
yeah, yeah.
so that was where I think I started to associate it with feelings of anxiety and not just with feelings of freedom and fun. And then COVID for me had the opposite effect, where I was one of those people who didn't catch it quick enough, and definitely noticed myself going into a pattern where there was no structure, no rules, no regulation
Mm.
anymore. And I would drink most days probably. And looking back again, I'm like, that must have been costing me so much money.
Yeah.
But I think it was coming out of that, the world opening up again, and being a bit embarrassed. I think you're right, having a bit of shame around some of that stuff, but also then being really anxious. For long-time listeners of the Women's Running podcast, we all remember my breakdown in the summer of 2021. And that was a really important turning point for me, I think, where like I I still, it took years to actually like beat some of those habits, but it was the
Mm.
first time I started to notice that like if I didn't drink for a period of time, then I felt a lot more mentally stable and
Yeah.
serene. And now it's
So
part
was that
of,
it? Was that your tipping point, that 2021, do you think?
yeah, but it was the tipping point in terms of realizing that I needed to spend more time sober, but it wasn't the tipping point in terms of like, it wasn't like the moment. I didn't wake up the next day and go like, okay, I'm going to put more strict rules in here for myself and I'm going to cut back on the booze.
Mm.
Instead, I carried on drinking too much probably, but being like, why am I so anxious? And then it wasn't until, I can't remember. I honestly can't remember. Maybe like 20, like recently, like maybe
Mm.
a couple of years ago, that I think I tried doing like a dry stint where I did like a month or something, just because I was like, I really want to prove to myself
Yeah.
that I can do this. And then it was like maybe January 2024 or something that I think I did that same rule for you, where I didn't do full dry Jan, but I was like, I'm going to really strictly stick with not drinking in the weeks, drinking,
Mm.
only having a drink on the weekend. And then it kind of slipped back a little bit before Christmas. And then 2025, I started marathon training, and I was like, right, okay, this has slipped again over Christmas. I've probably drunk every day in December, as kind of
Mm.
sometimes happens with these things
Yeah,
where
yeah,
you
yeah.
end up going to parties and drinks. And so I did full dry January and actually loved it. And I didn't drink in April because of the marathon training. I had quite a few periods of time
Yeah.
where I didn't drink, and that was where I really started to notice that correlation. And now I think I've rewired a little bit in my brain. I still find myself like gagging for a glass of wine sometimes.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Natural, I think, when you've used that as a bit of a coping mechanism for such a long time.
Mm.
But I think I've started to create a similar association with calmness and relaxation and enjoyment and a lovely evening with like not drinking and having a herbal tea and having a nice snack, and like I
God,
really look
yeah.
forward to those evenings now.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Yeah, like the herbal tea moment, I definitely have bought into that. I think it's really interesting the kind of when we first started talking and I was talking about giving up cigarettes, and
Mm.
I was talking about that sense of shame then and that was more to do with people. It was more to do with kind of leaving the office at kind of weird times, or like looking as though you didn't work as much as your co-workers because you were going out for a fag break, and also like the smell of cigarettes. And so it was kind of that sort of weird shame, embarrassment kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I find it interesting actually that both of us, looking back at our drinking histories, like I definitely look back at myself, at my drunken self, and there is such a huge sense of shame.
Mm.
And it also gets mixed up in, like, when I am heading out these days to a big social event, for instance, like our work Christmas party or
Mm.
awards dues that we go to, I go there with a certain sense of trepidation because a small part of me is really concerned about what I might do or say
Mhm.
if I drink too much. Like, I'm so worried that 52-year-old me will behave like 22-year-old me and do something really, really silly. And, we've witnessed people do things a bit like that around
Yeah.
us who are kind
Oh,
of my age. And
I've
it
definitely shown my
terrifies me.
pants at a Christmas party trying to do a yoga position because I was really drunk.
It's those sorts of, I've said awful, I still have said things where I've just gone, oh, why have I said that? I become very confessional.
Yeah.
Um, but maybe
Yeah.
I'm a bit like that anyway.
Well, do you wanna know why scientifically?
Yes, I do. Holly, please tell
So,
me.
I'm interested in this, like, I don't want to make this like a preachy or scary episode. We both said that before we started recording, but
Yeah.
I do think it is one of those ones where we might have to slightly conclude that, like, it is natural to be worried about this because some
Yeah.
of it makes for quite grim reading. Um, so this is what's actually happening when you're drinking. So it deals in units. So to sort of roughly sum it up, 2 units is about a pint or a sort of 175 ml glass of wine, I think. Or if you deal in spirits, I think it's
Yes.
like a
Yeah.
double of something, double
Mm.
G&T or something.
Mhm. But with units, you have to be really, really careful of, don't you? Because I have noticed that I used to always think a unit was a glass. I think in the olden days they would say a unit was a glass of wine, but what they meant was 125, and they meant like a 9% alcohol wine, which you can barely get anymore.
Yeah.
So yeah, 2 units for one glass of wine. So you normally see, don't you, on the side of a bottle label, it will tell you how many units is in there, and it's way more than you might think. It's not like 6 units of wine in a bottle, 6 units of alcohol in a bottle of wine. It's not. It's usually more like 20, isn't it? It's huge.
Yeah,
It's a
definitely.
vast
Obviously,
amount.
it
Yeah.
completely depends on the alcohol percentage, and yeah, on the size. Like even a pint,
Mm.
I think what I was reading was like for a pint that was like 3.84% or something, and it's like
Yeah.
that's a lot less than quite a lot of pints.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But so 1 to 2 units, so that's a glass of something basically.
Hmm.
After drinking 1 to 2 units of alcohol, your heart rate, this is from the NHS website, your heart rate speeds up and your blood vessels expand, giving you the warm, sociable, and talkative feeling associated with moderate drinking.
Hmm.
4 to 6 units, so 2 or 3 pints. After drinking 4 to 6 units, your brain and nervous system starts to be affected. It begins to affect the part of your brain associated with judgment and decision making, causing you to be more reckless and uninhibited. The alcohol also impairs the cells in your nervous system, making you feel lightheaded and adversely affecting your reaction time and coordination. So I guess that's when we start being like, definitely no driving. You might say something silly. That's what's going on in your body then. 8 to 9 units. So four or five drinks.
Yeah.
Um, After drinking 8 to 9 units of alcohol, your reaction times will be much slower. Your speech will begin to slur and your vision will begin to lose focus. Your liver, which filters alcohol out of your body, will be unable to remove all of the alcohol overnight. So it's likely you'll wake up with a hangover.
Right. Okay.
Interesting one.
That's interesting because that's 8 to 9. That's quite a lot,
That's like, yeah,
isn't
four
it?
pints, I guess,
Or
or
4
three and a,
glasses of wine,
yeah, 4 glasses of
and
wine.
I can wake up with a hangover. These days, I can wake up with a hangover if I have 2 glasses of wine.
Mm,
So I think this is all very. It should all be kind of bracketed, shouldn't it? It'd be like what it does depend on what you're used to, what you're used to drinking, and how your body reacts to alcohol. Because people react to alcohol differently, don't
mm,
they? Like there's a huge difference. I mean, I know people that would wake up with a hangover after 1 glass of wine, people who would be unaffected after 4,
yeah,
and it does depend on genetics, what you're used to, what you've put your body through, all those sorts of things, and also your age.
yeah.
And I'll talk about this afterwards because I know I've interrupted your flow, and I'm sorry. I'll let you get
No,
back
that's
onto it.
okay.
But
It is, you're right, it's interesting, but I guess scientifically what is actually going on there is like, because I think it says a little bit later on in the thing that it takes something like, it's like an hour or something for, I can't remember. I'll get to it. But there is
sorry.
there is a scientific sort of like logic to how long it takes your liver to process a unit of alcohol. So
Mm,
maybe the tolerance thing is more to do with like your, I don't know, how quickly you're metabolizing, and then you're like how used to the feelings you are. I have no idea. But
mm,
um so 10 to 12, so we're talking 5 pints, 5 or 6 glasses of wine. After drinking 10 to 12 units of alcohol, your coordination will be highly impaired, placing you at serious risk of having an accident. The high level of alcohol has a depressant effect on both your mind and body, which makes you drowsy. The amount of alcohol will begin to reach toxic levels. Your body attempts to quickly pass out the alcohol in your urine. This will leave you feeling badly dehydrated in the morning, which may cause a severe headache. The excess amount of alcohol in your system can also upset your digestion, leading to symptoms of nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, and indigestion. More than 12 units. If you drink
mm.
more than 12 units of alcohol, you're at considerable risk of developing alcohol poisoning, particularly if you're drinking many units over a short period of time. It usually takes the liver about an hour to remove 1 unit of alcohol from the body. There we go.
Okay.
Alcohol poisoning occurs when excessive amounts of alcohol start to interfere with the body's automatic functions, such as breathing, heart rate, gag reflex, which prevents you choking. Alcohol poisoning can cause a person to fall into a coma and could lead to their death. Obviously, this is quite
Oof.
extreme. Like,
Yeah.
I definitely know people who can house 6 pints
Yeah.
and that doesn't happen to them. But it's quite scary, isn't it? Because it's like
Yeah.
actually realizing like how that alcohol, how that level of alcohol can possibly affect your body is like,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I think that's going to be a thing that I think of a lot in the back of my mind now as well. That fact about like 1 hour to sort of purify one
Yeah.
unit of alcohol, roughly. I guess, like you said, there'll be various genetic and like and
Yeah.
factors
Although
and
it
stuff.
doesn't work on a staggered system. I know that drinking a glass of wine, waiting for an hour, then drinking another glass of wine, waiting an hour, drinking a third glass of wine, waiting an hour, it doesn't go back to 0 each
No,
time, does it?
no,
So
no, I don't
that's
think it does. And
mm,
um, I think it's just that's going to be in my brain a little bit more in terms of thinking like, yeah, if you drink like 10 units, then
mm.
you're going to wake up in the morning and your body is still going to be processing that,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
kind of crazy to think. But um, I know you've got some slightly longer term things as well, but I also kind of want to ask you about like effects on your general health, but maybe we'll do that at the end.
Okay. Like, yeah, if I do the slightly scary long-term effects, which is the reason why we're not nuts to worry about this at all, because actually, I mean, again, we don't want to give people the heebie-jeebies just as we're entering into kind of the festive season and so on.
I
But
know. I
I
would like to
I
disclaim that I'm going to a wedding this weekend and many units of prosecco will be consumed.
quite like yeah, we're not standing on a soapbox and preaching sobriety. That's not what we're doing. All we're doing is talking about our own relationship with booze, and yeah, we'll come back to it after this because I definitely would like to kind of, I don't know, emphasize how well it makes me feel to not have so much booze. Like, I do realize I'm a very controlling person, and then this is one way in which I've controlled my health and my lifestyle by
Mhm.
kind of compressing the amount of time that I can drink booze. But it's one of those, when you get a little addiction when you're, I don't know, like that, an addiction which is a controlling behavior, but that's actually kind of healthy. And I'm saying what I was going to say at the end, and I'm saying it now, but I will say it now. I feel so much more healthy. I feel so much happier
Mm.
from not drinking. I love waking up not hungover and not having that sense of dread, having the beer fear, having the kind of, oh my God, what did I say last night? What did I do last night? And then that kind of shame, but then also that just the physical effects of it and the sweats and the
The bad
um
sleep, that's a big one for
yeah,
me. Like, I just
terrible
sleep
sleep.
so much better now that I don't drink very much, and, like, especially, like, not drinking in the week, I really notice then on, like, a Saturday morning when I wake up that I'll be like, "Oh, I slept so shit," and even though I
Mm.
didn't have any worries because I wasn't waking up to a, desk full of emails, and it almost like my anxiety is worse, and especially if I wake
Oh
up
my
at 3
God.
o'clock in the middle of the night. Oh
Oh,
god.
absolutely. I wish I'd said that earlier, but you said it, and so that's fine. But yeah, the sleep. Oh my God. I think as a kind of perimenopausal woman, sleep suddenly becomes the most important thing in your life. And obviously it's important to absolutely everybody, but because sleep is affected so badly when estrogen just pisses off out of our bodies, that HRT can do one thing, but what it can't, there has to be all this kind of, you have to think holistically about your body and your health and your lifestyle. You can't just medicate.
Yeah.
And yes, magnesium does help and so on and so forth, but not drinking booze is probably the number one reason why my sleep has got better over the past sort of couple of years,
Yeah.
for
I would
sure.
like to say as a little bit of a, like, thing for anybody who's listening that's been in the place or is in the place where you feel like you can't sleep or you don't sleep well at all if you aren't having a glass of wine,
Mm,
because I've definitely had periods of that, like in lockdown, if I like when I was drinking more heavily, where I thought it was the other way round. And so
yeah.
that was a thing that put me off like drinking less then, because I would be like, oh, but I sleep like a baby if I've had a glass of wine, and I don't
Oh,
if I
yeah.
do. Sorry, I don't if I don't. But it really doesn't take very long to get get that back the right way round again.
Yes,
And
because what's happening with the wine is obviously it's enabling you to fall asleep nice and quickly,
yeah,
but it affects the quality of your sleep that you have during the night. So I still have that. If I have a glass of wine, yeah, I'm out like a light.
yeah.
But I'll be waking up at 2 and 4 and possibly 6.
Exactly.
So,
Whereas you might
yeah.
struggle to go to sleep a little bit more if you're alone with all of your thoughts spiraling and that's not been dampened by a glass of wine. But
Yeah.
that sleep is really, really good quality sleep, I
It's
find.
quality,
Not
yeah,
always.
yeah.
It's not a fix all, is it? But
No, it's not. Let me just do the quick scaries, and then let's talk about how you're feeling better about yourself since you've stopped
okay.
drinking quite so much. Um, Long-term effects of, we've gone through the short-term effects because really you've gone through those, but the long-term effects of heavy drinking is what I'm going to be talking about here. And it's none of them are nice. None of them are like you just become a all-round more sociable person. They are grim. There's an increased risk of cardiovascular disease because heavy drinking can increase blood pressure and cholesterol, raising the risk of heart attack and stroke. And again, as women, this needs to really sink in because I've even been to see doctors who have said to me, who've asked me how many units I drink a week. I've been really smug and I've said, oh, maybe 2 or something.
Hmm.
And I spoke to a doctor who said to me, I wish it was 0. And I want you to tell all of your friends who are in your 40s and 50s to drink no booze. And she was talking about cardiovascular disease. She was talking about women in their 40s and 50s, how things like that can sometimes go undetected because you present with issues to do with that sort of thing, like increased blood pressure or whatever. And people write it off as menopause or
Yeah.
something else, or stress or anxiety or whatever. Actually, drinking has a huge effect. And for women, it can kind of go undetected. So do bear that in mind. Liver disease, obviously. Long-term alcohol consumption increases the risk of several cancers, including mouth, breast, bowel, and liver cancer. Um, and she also, again, I remember the reason why I was seeing that doctor was because I had a lump in my breast, which was a cyst, so it was all good. But she was saying this is one of the reasons why you need to
Yeah.
knock drinking on the head. Um, I'm not going to be able to say it. Pancreatitis.
Yeah.
Chronic
Perfect.
alcohol abuse. Thank you very much. Chronic alcohol abuse can cause the pancreas to become inflamed and damaged. Brain damage. It can cause damage to the brain, leading to problems with memory and thinking, and can even result in irreversible dementia. Bone and immune system damage. Alcohol can interfere with bone formation. Again, women, think about it, leading to thinner bones and an increased risk of fractures. It can also weaken the immune system, making you more vulnerable to infections. I'm going to stop there because it's really, really depressing.
It is a little bit, but there are
Mm,
joys to it's not just giving things up. I think that's the thing that I've always really struggled with.
mm.
Um, like New Year's resolutions or whatever that involve taking things away. I always think, oh, I'd rather add something in
Yes,
because I find that
yes.
easier and it feels less like punishing yourself and more like and more like giving yourself a new thing to entertain yourself or whatever. But I think what's really helped with the booze thing, because sometimes it can feel, if you really want a glass of wine but you're thinking, oh, I shouldn't, it's a Wednesday and I want to sleep well, or even like, Friday or Saturday, but you just don't want to drink that weekend. You don't want to drink full stop. It can
Mm.
feel really tempting if it's something that you have used as a crutch before. And I think reminding yourself that even though it does feel a little bit like a denial, what it is giving you and what it gives me now is something that like adds so much to my life. Like
Yeah,
my general fitness is better. And I wouldn't change that because I love being able to run longer, faster, enjoy it more. I feel like my body feels less sort of bloaty than it
yeah.
did when I was drinking more, and I feel a little bit like better in myself for that. And yeah, I just feel more well rested and my sleep feels better. Lots of people also talk about like better skin. I wouldn't necessarily say that that's happened for me, but
No.
it is what it is.
Yeah.
I think like obviously mental health, I still have moments. It's never going to be a cure for anything, but not drinking has really helped me. And I think anybody who really suffers from anxiety, I would recommend giving it a go for a bit, because I remember one of our listeners writing in once and saying to me, anyone with anxiety shouldn't be drinking. And I
Yes.
remember being like, all right, that sounds like that's quite, a strong way of putting it. And I now kind of agree. I still am going to take that hit sometimes for the fact that I enjoy the social aspect. I enjoy
Mm.
some of that stuff that relaxes your brain a little bit and makes you more chatty. But I will always have that in the back of my mind where I'm like, this is a thing that is particularly for me as someone who has got some alcohol addiction stuff in the family and also who suffers from mental health stuff, that like I need to be particularly mindful of and make sure I'm keeping tabs on a bit.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel very similarly. And
Mm.
but I love what you're saying about, when we first got those emails about, you should just stop drinking sort of thing. I remember both of us were sort of took umbrage of it and about it. And yeah, now similar to you, I just sort of look back and go, "Oh, yeah, no, actually." And I think, yeah, there's I don't ever really want to go back to having that kind of volume of alcohol because of the after effects of it. But what I love is that concept of, it's a bit like when we've talked about kind of dieting.
Mm.
And there was that one guy that's a friend of ours who'd said to us, it's not about taking stuff away, it's about kind of food flooding. So
Yeah.
instead of kind of taking away chocolates and crisps and biscuits, you flood your overall diet with protein, and it means that you're just so full up and full of energy and stuff that you don't need to reach for the other bits and pieces. And in a way, we've done that by introducing new things into our kind of drinking culture. So herbal tea, for instance, I see that as being, herbal tea I thought was the most insipid, pathetic drink until about 5 years ago, when I was like, this is really cozy and
It's
lovely.
so cozy and lovely. It's my happy place.
I love it.
Whenever when my therapist gets me to imagine a happy place, I'm holding a mug of herbal tea.
Okay, what flavor?
Something really gingery.
Oh, I love it. I like Pucker 3 Ginger.
Yeah,
Give
so
them a
do
shout
I.
out.
Though I
Love that
will
one.
say sometimes you get a funny batch of that and it's no gin. It's more like no ginger.
Oh, right. Do you know, I gave my brother one of those and it blew his top off. I don't think he'd had so much ginger before in his life. But I love that one. I love a spiced apple as well. But yeah, I
Yeah,
see
me
that
too.
lovely, cozy drinks, but also like beer, like 0% beer.
Love a
Um,
zero beer. It's completely changed for me some of that habitual stuff that we were talking about that I struggle with.
yeah,
Like I had it this week. This week I'd had a long day and I was like, I really, really want a glass of wine or a cold beer or something while I'm cooking. Like
yeah.
that sort of slight association that you have where I'm like, I want that sort of crack open a thing and like make a nice meal and have a nice thing to sip on. And I had a zero Asahi beer
Oh, yes, I think I've got one in the fridge. Yeah.
and it was delicious and it completely scratched that itch that then made me be like that didn't make me be like, oh, having a non-zero acai is a terrible
Mm,
thing to do, I'll never do that again, but instead just makes me be like, okay, it wasn't necessarily about that, it was about what felt like a little reward of like
mm.
long day, take a little moment to have a sip of something nice, like feel like I don't know, I'm having a
It's a
moment
wind down,
to
and it's a
myself.
wind down. Yeah,
Yeah.
I love it. You know, I got to a bit, I think it was last week, and I'd had a long day. I was really stressed, but I'd just closed my laptop or something like that. I was chasing around. I was making like 14 different meals for 15 different picky eaters. And um and Dave said, "Oh, do you want a zero?" And do you know, my gut reaction and what I immediately said was, "Oh, no, no, no." As if he was offering me a proper one. I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh, no, no, no." And then I just went, "Oh, yeah, go on then." So I see it as such a treat that it has
Yeah.
become an actual treat. So, and you take the first sip and it's like, "Oh, grown-up drink." Like we keep little cans of tonic in the fridge as well
Mhm.
for precisely the same thing, but I do now see them very much like squash. So it doesn't have the same hit as a zero beer. But
Yeah.
yeah, adding those things into like the weekly shop, having them there to grab at as a kind of, as a wind down treat, has removed that need for me of having a wind down alcoholic drink in
Yeah,
the evening. So,
absolutely.
yeah.
I think to semi-conclude
Mhm.
your question of both of our question of am I nuts to worry about booze, about drinking too much?
Mm.
I think for this one, as we've alluded to, the answer is like it's maybe not something to worry about, but definitely something to be conscious of and to be thinking about because it does have negative health effects long term and short term, and especially annoyingly for us women, as is always the case.
Yeah,
But
I think again, I'd like to repeat that as well, because I think so often the concept of drinking regularly and drinking often can be quite a masculine, or seen
mm,
as a masculine issue, the beers with the boys kind of thing. And
right? It all
Yeah.
contributes to this was what I was gonna say, is like the thing that we shouldn't do, and we are nuts for having, is shame. Because
Mm.
as I feel like has been evident in this conversation, there is so much cultural stuff around this, and there are so many complicated reasons. Like, one of the kickbacks that we got from this conversation that we had similarly on the main podcast last year was people were a bit like, I'm fed up of hearing about this. It's not a big deal. Like, drinking isn't a big deal to me. But for so many of us, it's so much more complicated than like, do I have a glass of wine? It's, this is my system that I've created in my brain,
Mm.
entrenched in a neural pathway to reward myself for hard work, or to de-stress myself when I'm going to blow my top, or to be able to cope with social situations. Or it's so much more complicated. Plus then you add
Yeah.
in all of the, advertising and social constructs and tradition around all of
Yeah.
it.
And
Like,
and yeah, and I think about everything that I've looked at on Instagram over the past 10 years, bearing in mind that my kids are 11 and 12 now. Every parent Instagram thing for the last 10, 12 years has been booze focused. It's all that kind of that, hurrah for gin, that kind
yeah.
of, I've seen people launch wine that's actually called mummy juice, which sounds disgusting, and it will be disgusting, but
Oh dear,
sounds
yeah.
gynecological.
I feel
But
like you need to have age verification to access something called mummy juice.
I know, it's gross, but there is a huge culture of mums dropping the kids off at school, or at the end of, being surrounded by chaos and having their lovely glass of white wine kind of thing. And that's seen as being completely and that's been totally normalized over the past kind of 10, 15 years of that's the way that we cope, and ha ha ha, that's our little coping mechanism. And it's not ha ha fucking ha, because osteoporosis, heart disease, there's all this shit.
Mm,
We need to not be reaching for a massive bucket of Savvy B at sort of 3 o'clock in the afternoon, because if we do, that's a little concern, isn't it? Because we've got to think of our long-term health. And
yeah,
it's not funny anymore. It's not the fodder for a little book that you pick up in Waterstones next to the till. It
yeah.
shouldn't be. It's much more problematic than that. Anyway, I'm getting really, really cross about
No,
it.
no, I completely get you. I think, like, we've done it on this podcast, and again, I do want to, like, reassure the part of our audience that do feel seen, I guess, by that, that, like, we do still have a glass of wine, and we really
Oh
enjoy
God,
doing
yeah.
that together.
Mm.
But I completely agree that, like, what we're missing by looking at all of that is, like, what is causing people to be so at the end of their tether that it's a universally memed concept that you might drink a bottle of wine at 3 o'clock in the afternoon because of
Yeah.
childcare stress. Like,
Yeah.
it's like, that is, a to me, bit of a cultural wake up call about how we use alcohol, and how normalized it's become as something that, like, that we all use as a coping mechanism.
Mhm.
But it's very complicated, and maybe we need to leave a little link down below in the show notes for this one. Um, on Because I think, to be honest, knowing our audience, there are going to be a real mixture of people listening to this, and I know there are going to be a lot of people listening to this who are like, yeah, booze is bad, and I'm not interested in, I don't drink it at all, and this episode has been nothing more than affirmation of that. But I think that there are also likely to be lots of people who might feel a bit of anxiety, or feel a bit of concern around, like, and maybe I do need to drink less, me included, after this chat
Mm.
again. Um, and maybe we need to leave a bit of a link to somewhere below that people might be able to get a bit of advice on.
Yeah, I'll get. Yeah, I'll pull a lot of things together, I think, because this is an important subject, and I do realise we don't have an expert on here to talk about it, and we are literally just talking about our own experiences. So, um, I'll put a trigger warning in the intro, just to make sure that everyone knows that we are talking about alcohol, even if they weren't sure about it, and we know, addiction is rife in all walks of life,
Mhm.
and um, not least the running community through which we do our large podcast through. Um, so yeah, I'll put a load of notes. I'll get together some links to some support and advice places that we know we can trust. And this isn't we're not doing this to scare people at all. We're doing this because we are really interested in each other's relationship with alcohol, because we've got
Yeah.
loads of similarities, we've got lots of bits of difference, but it's interesting. I find Holly infinitely interesting anyway, but like super interesting just to watch you, 20 years younger than me, be so much more grown up about
Mm.
stuff like this than I was at your age, because you are now at your age at the like when I was your age, I was absolutely going mental with booze. So
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because like, I still feel a bit of shame because other friends have completely, before me, come to a totally sober lifestyle, and obviously the generation below, as we were saying, so many more of them now don't drink full stop. And
mm,
like, for all of my cynicism around, like, financial situations and COVID and everything, I do think that regardless, like, you have to say that that's a good
I
shift.
think it's great. I had no sober friends,
Mhm.
none. I can't think of a single one. So yeah, I think it's a fantastic shift. I think it's great. I think it's great. Um,
Yeah.
all that said, I'm going out to the fireworks tonight, and I will definitely be having a drink or three. So because I'm
Yeah,
out,
just
so
to
I
normalize
yeah.
same seas. I'm going to a wedding. I probably will have like a glass of wine tonight because that's what will be going on when I arrive. But
Mm.
I will try and save myself and be a bit sensible because I've got to go for a bloody run before this wedding tomorrow. So
Yeah, and I will be going out and I will be doing that, but I will also be drinking water, and I will also eat food before I go out and things like that. So I know that there's kind of, and when I come back, I will drink a pint of water before bed and take my magnesium tablets because I need to get up and do boot camp tomorrow. So, you
yeah.
know.
Well, here's to being very dull and no, here's to being a bit more sensible about looking after our long-term health and
Yeah.
still being absolute legends.
Yeah.